During World War II, many women accused of collaborating with the enemy faced a form of public humiliation known as the Ugly Carnival in France. These women, suspected of intimate relations with German soldiers, were paraded in front of large crowds and subjected to the demeaning act of having their heads forcibly shaved. Sources indicate that around 20,000 women had their heads shaved in France as part of these acts of retribution. In addition, they were made to run a punishing gauntlet, where an incensed crowd would kick, strike, and attempt to inflict further harm upon them. This spectacle was viewed by Allied forces as appalling, and many soldiers from the Allied nations were hesitant to intervene. The women were often marked with swastikas and other symbols associated with the Nazis, in an effort to disgrace and penalize them. Some women in Paris, who worked in establishments frequented by German troops, even lost their lives during these public spectacles. However, one French woman led an intriguing life, diverging significantly from the norm. She was a gold medal-winning athlete and even became a distinguished guest of Adolf Hitler. Despite this, she would later be infamously known as the hyena of the Gestapo, due to her active collaboration with the Nazi regime. In retaliation for her actions, the French resistance exacted a heavy toll on Violette Maurice. But what exactly is her story? Violette Maurice was born in April of 1893, the child of a retired French military cavalry captain. She was of mixed French and Arabic descent. During her formative years, she resided in a convent for nuns and eventually tied the knot with Édouard Joseph Gourard in August 1914. Their marriage, however, would dissolve 9 years later. As Europe was engulfed in the turmoil of World War I, Maurice opted to play a role in the ongoing conflict, learning to become a driver. Throughout the war, she operated ambulances on some of the most perilous battlefields. Serving as a message courier close to the front lines during key battles like the Somme and Verdun, she garnered a reputation for her skill and daring. Apart from her wartime activities, Maurice was an enthusiastic athlete. She played soccer for the French women's national team and earned gold medals in the Women's Olympiads. She had a very large frame and was over 70 kilograms in weight. In addition to being an accomplished football player, Maurice was selected for the national water polo team. She loved to box and easily defeated many male competitors. Among the other sports she participated in were road bicycle racing, motorcycle racing, car racing, airplane racing, horseback riding, tennis, archery, diving, swimming, weightlifting, and Greco-Roman wrestling. She even had a mastectomy, a kind of breast reduction surgery, so she could accommodate her large chest better in motor vehicles. She competed in events like the Tour de France automobile, along with several other long-distance and endurance races. However, her lifestyle diverged sharply from the norms for women during that era. She wore men's attire, frequently used strong language, and was known for heavy drinking. Consequently, the French Women's Sports Federation chose not to renew her athletic license, effectively disqualifying her from participating in the 1928 Summer Olympics. She even assaulted a referee during a soccer game, leading to the revocation of her racing license as well. Subsequently, she initiated legal proceedings against these governing bodies. During her court case, she declared, "We live in a country made rotten by money and scandals, ruled by speechifiers, schemers and cowards. This country of little people is not worthy of its elders, not worthy of survival. Someday its decay will bring it to the level of a slave, but if I'm still here, I won't be one of the slaves. Believe me, it's not in my temperament." In January of 1933, Violette Maurice and her partner Yvonne Debray moved onto a houseboat. They anchored on the River Seine in the northwest part of Paris. They lived on money they inherited and also sang to earn more. They even got a bit famous, sometimes performing on the radio. But on the night before Christmas in 1937, while eating dinner with friends at a restaurant, Violette met a drunk and angry man named Joseph Le Cam. She tried to calm him down, but the next day he showed up at their houseboat. A fight started between Le Cam and Maurice. He took out a knife and tried to stab her. Maurice pushed him away and then began to beat him to a pulp with her club-like hands. No easy feat, considering Le Cam was an ex-legionnaire before finally taking out a gun and shooting Le Cam twice. He later died in hospital. Because of this, Violette was arrested and charged with killing him. She had to stay in jail until her court date. But at her trial, she was let go because it was judged to be an act of self-defense. Her athletic achievements were fast forgotten, and she began to slide into the dark world of politics. In December 1935, she met Gertrude Hanecker, a former racer who was also a German reporter. Hanecker worked for the SD, the Nazi security service, and invited Violette Morris to go to the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. There, she became a special guest of Adolf Hitler. After that, she began to work as a German spy. She gave them important info about the French army that she could find through her connections. Some of the info was quite useful, like plans of the Maginot Line and maps of key places in Paris. She also gave them detailed drawings of a French tank, the Saumur S-35. This info helped the Germans a lot when they invaded France in World War II. But it's not clear why she chose to help the Nazis. Perhaps the fact that they had invited her to Olympics after having been snubbed by her own country's sporting organization was the reason. She kept working for the Germans during their occupation and joined the Karlingi to collect money that the French had to pay the Germans for goods. This group was really a French front for the Gestapo. They often arrest and beat up people. Living well on her houseboat, helped by new money and connections, she did many jobs for the Germans in France. One of her goals was to stop people from the Special Operations Executive. This was a British spy group that worked with the French resistance. People think that Violette took part in torturing suspects during this time, and many of these were women. She is said to have done really cruel things, like beating and whipping the prisoners until they couldn't stand it, performing degrading sexual acts and dominating them. The Nazis provided an outlet for her aggressive, monstrous side. Violette Morris also helped get black market fuel for the Nazis. She ran a repair shop for the German Air Force, fixing and fueling their planes. She also drove important people from both the Nazi and French sides, doing this even as France was falling apart. Some history experts argue about how important her role was. Some say she was just an easy target to blame. But in Paris, she was infamous as an enforcer and torturer working for the Gestapo. What she did led to many French people getting arrested and beaten. Because of her bad name, the French resistance began to target her. On April 26, 1944, she was driving her Citroën car on a road from Lévis to Éparges in Normandy. In the car were people from the Ballot family, who had also gained wealth and power from the Nazis. What she didn't know was that the French resistance had tampered with her vehicle, planning to trap her. As her car suddenly stopped on the country road, resistance soldiers came out from hidden spots. They started shooting their machine guns and other weapons at the car. The car was riddled with bullets, and everyone inside was killed, including the children. It is still not known if Morris or the family were the intended targets. Either way, Morris was dead. Her large and robust body was destroyed by bullets, and her mangled remains were moved to a morgue where no one came to claim them. Thus she was unceremoniously tossed in an unmarked grave. A lot of historians argue about what she really did in Nazi-ruled France, and some question how much she actually helped them. It's thought that a few months before she died, she told the Gestapo about a group of resistance fighters who were bringing people into the country secretly by parachute. The Gestapo then killed 6 of these people, including a resistor's wife. Another time she gave the Germans a stash of weapons, and 7 people from the resistance were killed. 10 more were sent to Paris jails on her tip-offs. But some say they believe the resistance used her as a scapegoat, a fact made easier by her eccentric history, networking in Parisian lesbian nightclubs, and her unusual sexual proclivities. Violette Morris's time as a famous and skilled sports player in the 1920s and her service as an ambulance driver got lost because of her work with the Nazis. She died a brutal death being ripped to shreds in a machine gun crossfire. What's interesting is why Hitler invited her to the Olympics. He might have seen her as someone useful for gathering secrets, which she did. Or perhaps he was interested in her unusual physical stature and athletic achievements. She was a woman with a troubled history that included killing someone, but she was also going through hard times with money in the 1930s. The friendly acts by the Nazis may have made her willing to help them during World War II, and the information she gave was important for the German attack on France. Thanks for watching.